Remember, Chinua Achebe is advising us. When things are falling apart, as they are doing right now, we have a lot of social media problems. We have a lot of problems with our youths. We have a lot of problems within our religions and everything. The Shakaholas have met us. We have suicide happening, and we can talk about suicide in a different show. So many problems. We have the problems of drugs and substance abuse. There is an alcoholic in your family. That is a conflict. How are you solving it, my viewers? We had a conflict with Gen Zs, and right now, through that conflict, solution of a broad-based government was born into. So conflicts are always part of every society, but it is incumbent and it is important that every society is very careful, and this I must say, every society must be very careful on how they handle conflict, because even within the beauty of conflict, there are dangers of conflict. At Milestone Sociologists, it can be done, it will be done. Me and you only need to do our part. Welcome, my viewers, to yet another show where we are going to reflect on what our society needs. Let us understand what is a society. How do we live in a society? How do we coexist with each other? How do we live together in harmony? Thank you.
Dr. Today you're helping us understand society, because this is where we are, living with different people, living together with different traditions, cultures. There's a lot in a society. Maybe you can just take us through that, understanding society.
Sure, well and good. I think, as we have always done, let us first start understanding and defining the concept that we are dealing with. What is a society? A society is any grouping of people living together. It may be a society of, maybe like you said, a tribe makes a society. Kenya is a society, the Kenyan society. The East African can be a society. It's a group of people living together, and they share certain ideals and certain commonalities. Africa is a society, and even the world can be a society, a global village, we are told right now. So society is a group of people living together, but any society has its own complexities, its own differences. Like you have said, there could be a society like Kenya. Let us reflect on Kenya, because we are in Kenya. We have 42 different tribes. These are 42 different complexities, and in every tribe, even if you go deeper, there are different aspects of religion, their educational backgrounds and everything. It's different beliefs, one family believing from this one.
Yeah,
traditions and everything. So the society as itself is a group of people living together, but with a lot of complexities, with a lot of differences and even similarities. So it is always when you're dealing with a society about people, it is ever changing, because people are always changing. They are meeting other people, there are different trends and coming, technology is coming, it changes the way people are. People move from one level to another. And if I can just give two, people move from different levels of complexities based on the way, the challenges they are facing. Every challenge prepares them for a new level. So we are living in different times, and this is now why it is even important for us to discuss more about these societies, because we are living in times when so much changes are happening. Countries are fighting with countries, religions are fighting with religions, tribes are fighting with the tribes and inter-tribes and ethnic differences, and all these are complexes within the society. It behooves us to speak deeper into them, because there is no other way. We must find solutions within our everyday lives.
Let's talk about the conflict part of it.
And within sociology, if you may allow me, there are 4 C's of every society. And the first C that helps you understand the society is conflict. Conflict is the differences between one group and the other. And it can be even at the most micro level of one person to the other, between a husband and a wife, between a husband and his other siblings, sibling rivalry, and between brothers and sisters. All these are aspects of conflict. And growing from a micro to a bigger level, the macro level, it goes widening because you have conflict with your husband and the wife. But even more so, we have conflicts between one church and the other church. Denominations. All of them are Christians, but we have conflicts between them. We have conflicts between people of the same country because of this tribe and this tribe. We have political conflicts, we have economic conflicts, we have social conflicts. And all these are part and parcel of every society. There is no one single society without a conflict. There is no one single family without a conflict. But what is the most important part to deal with this component of a society is how people solve their problems, how people approach their differences, how people solve the everyday conflicts, because conflicts are very important in society. For the very first time, allow me to say that, because from conflict, solutions are born. From conflicts, people talk. From conflicts, the concept of dialogue is born. And when concept of dialogue is born, there is change. And the conflict is the biggest giver of birth of change. I would say that conflict begets change. And change is always constant. There is always, people are always changing. For us to change from KANU, from a one-party state in Kenya, there was conflict. And we moved from one-party state to a multi-party state. And even in the multi-party era, we got conflict, if we are talking about political conflicts per se. And even after that, we got to another conflict of the unbogable era. And even when the unbogable team came, there was even more conflict, and we went into a referendum. The referendum brought into a new conflict that saw two divides, the orange and the banana. And new conflict, through that conflict, a new party was called ODM. So you see how sometimes conflict brings solutions, begets solutions. And from the conflict of that constitution that failed, we begot ourselves a new constitution that is celebrated and enchanted up to now. So conflicts are sometimes positive. And even in political areas, you can see, just the other day we had a conflict with Gen Zs. And right now, through that conflict, solution of a broad-based government was born into. So conflicts are always part of every society. But it is incumbent and it is important that every society is very careful. And this I must say, every society must be very careful on how they handle conflict. Because even within the beauty of conflict, there are dangers of conflicts. Remember the South Sudan way. Countries have been torn apart. Families have been torn apart. People have been torn apart. Religions have been torn apart. So sometimes when conflict is not handled well, the instruments of power within conflict are very dangerous. How should conflict be handled well? I must say, and I must call, continuous dialogue within the society. A society that does not talk to each other is born to fail. Remember, I am a fan of Chinua Achebe. And Chinua Achebe was writing to us in his book, Things Fall Apart. And somewhere within his book, he says, sometimes when you're solving conflict, it is the case of a sesefly that falls on a man's scrotum. And caution must be applied. Caution must really be applied, because when he's talking about the scrotum, I think he's symbolizing the place of birth. This is the place that holds birth, that holds life. But a sesefly is there. We must be fast enough to wipe away the sesefly before it infects the scrotum, and there is no life. Death comes. But you must also be very wise the means you use, because if you use a big club or a big stick to hit it, you kill the sesefly, but you also kill the means of life. There is no more life. So there is beauty in the way we solve conflict. Like there was beauty and there was need for caution for us to always engage with our younger generation. Yes, we have as a society, there is the conflict of unemployment. It is there. There is need for a job, but we need to be very cautious as a country on how we approach this concept. Because if we do not take care of this, it may tear the country apart. And we all are aware, are alive and aware of all the dangers of not solving conflict the best way. So we must also know that conflict is part and parcel of every society. The biggest question, if my viewers are at a family, how do you solve your conflicts? How do you ensure that the conflicts do not generate to bigger levels? How do you ensure that these anthills do not become the mountains that separate you and you no longer have to see each other? There are people who have allowed anthills to become mountains, and now they are living in different sides of the mount of the mount hill, and the divide grows longer and longer. So when there is conflict at family level, at even individual level, we also have conflicts within ourselves. How do we solve our conflicts at individual level, before they lead us to depression? And we remember, I've always said the word depression is a disease, but must be understood at a very simple level as depression. Before we start depressing to rock bottom where we are sick and we are suffering, we must solve conflicts fast enough.
So conflict is part of society.
Yes.
Do you believe this cliche that says that where there is no conflict, there is no love? The way you relate to each other, you must have conflict. If you don't have conflicts, then you don't love each other.
I want to say that I would love to be an ascriber I want to ascribe to subscribe rather to the school of thought, because where there is love, there is conflict. Why? The word of God says that God is jealous. Mm-hmm. God is always at conflict when he wants you to worship him, but you don't. So when there is conflict and your spouse or your partner takes fault in you for not saying you're very beautiful, it means that when they were preparing, when they were making up the makeup, when they were putting up the lipstick, they were looking forward for one person to say you're very beautiful. Mm-hmm. So when they miss that concept from you, then it begets a war. Mm-hmm. But we must be very careful even at this point, because when there is no that conflict and nobody cares, a woman who your wife who used to tell you, why don't you tell me I'm smart, she always used to pick war with it. When she does not pick war with you, you must ask yourself, what happened? The conflict maybe you have started drifting away. And when there is that jealousness, when there is that positive conflict, and I must call it positive conflict, yeah. When there is that nikejeli za kujenga ujamaa, that positive conflict that makes the relationship more spicy. When it lacks, then you must start asking yourself, what went wrong? Where did the rain start beating us? And we must be ascribers of this school of thought of always solving conflict each and every day, not to let the boundaries grow bigger and bigger. We must never allow anthills become mountains, because when they become mountains, we are bound to live in different sides of the mountain. One will be on the leeward, one will be on the windward. They are totally different in nature. Yes.
Even in a society that is full of differences, yes. How can we best coexist?
Coexistence. Every society in another sea, coexistence. And coexistence is what now grows from conflict. You coexist with your spouse. You coexist with people from this different tribe. They speak different language, to be precise and to be correct with the term, because the term is always loaded with a lot of meanings. We must be correct. They speak a different. How do you coexist with them? I am a Christian but Presbyterian. You are Catholic. How do we coexist? She is Hindu. How do we coexist? They are African traditional religionists. How do we coexist with them? They hold different political views with me. I am maybe pro-ODM, you are UDA, you are Chama cha Mapinduzi, you are Chama cha Baba na Mama, or CCM, or any other political divide. How do we coexist? Yeah. And coexistence goes wider between people and even material things. Because there is this theoretical framework, there is a school of thought that believes on co-ingredients, that we are always co-ingredient of a society. That when you are co-ingredient, remember the simplest understanding of co-ingredients is githeri. For you to have beautiful githeri, there must be beans, there must be potatoes, and sometimes we even introduce some little of the red stuff. Dania, birganya, hoho, to spice it up. So there is the co-ingredient and the coexistence of this thing in one pot. When it is boiling, they are boiling together. When it is cooling down, they are cooling together. They are coexisting together for it to be tasty. Can we allow ourselves as a society to coexist because there is beauty in coexistence. I want to give a very example that will resonate with my viewers. For a keyboard to produce sweet music, for there to be symphony, for there to be harmony, there must exist the black and the blue keys. When you press the black and the blue keys separately, music and melody begets. So every society, sometimes your husband picks the longer white keys and you're the shorter black keys. But remember, the beauty of the black keys cannot exist alone. The keys that produce soprano must never think that they are the biggest, because they need those of alto. And when they are all pressed in harmony, there is joy in it. So we must coexist within society. There will be conflicts within our coexistence, within our co-ingredient. When we are trying to co-ingredient with each other, let us always try to also have measure. Remember, when the beans become so many in the githeri, it becomes so bad. Maji yatazidi unga pale. When the salt is added, and remember, salt is very good in food, but when you overdo it, it becomes bad. So remember, we are talking all this within the background of a society, and the society we have broken down into family, into a school, into a tribe, into a religion, into that church. Let us always exist and coexist with each other. Let us remember that human beings have limitations. Let us try to understand each other. And the biggest thing in conflict and coexistence, there is communication. How do we communicate to each other as members of the society? How do we engage with each other as members of a different political divide? When we are doing, Mwalimu Nyerere used to say, siasa sio vihoja. Siasa ni kuchanganyua hoja. Sio vihoja. It is not conflict. It is discussing ideas. And through these ideas, we will make our society better. If we have political difference, can we avoid personal differences and discuss ideas, ideals, values, norms? Can we introduce hygiene? If I am allowed to say, can we introduce hygiene into our ways of coexistence? In that marriage, can you introduce hygiene into your coexistence with your spouse, with your children, with your in-laws, with your cousins, with your extended families? And we are living in an era whereby uncles and aunties, extended families no longer talk. And I believe this is within the Kenyan domain. When you all grow up, when you grow up with your siblings, they become aunties and uncles. Conflict originates. We never solve conflict. We are a society that does not solve conflicts. When we allow conflicts to grow, there is no coexistence. And the coexistence is not going to happen. And remember, when there is conflict that is not solved, the mountain grows. And you're living on that side, I'm living on this side. There is the society is starting to split. Yes.
When you talk about coexistence, that makes me think the cake is too big, so everyone can have a piece.
Yes.
But even in that process of everyone having a piece, competition is there. How do we take competition positively in a society?
And in taking competition positively, I want to believe in the spirit of tolerance. I want to believe in the spirit of togetherness. I want to believe in the spirit of communication. So when there is no tolerance, then the competition becomes negative. You are always competing on the means of elimination. We must not compete trying to eliminate others, but we must compete even with our own self, with our own goals. And when we are tolerant of each other, we can be able to learn from each other. In this society, remember, we want to coexist. You have an M-Pesa shop, I have an M-Pesa shop. There is no day that I will take all the customers away. You only need to be able to know, how am I competing within business? And in strategic planning, we say, what is my competitive advantage? How am I able to package myself as Milestone Sociologist and not be able to hate on the next TV channel? Because it has its own beauty. It has its own packaging. So when we understand our strengths, we are able to reflect within ourselves. Then we don't need to compete on negative grounds. If it is a church, it's called PEFA, And allow me just to use PEFA because just from the peak of name. And there is another one called Presbyterian. And there is another one called Catholic. And there is another one called Anglican. There is no need of negative competition. Just package your ministry well.
Wow.
Just be able to know what is my competitive advantage. Once you answer your competitive advantage, you have answered competition. Within any business, let us talk to my sister there selling her own oranges. When there is another person selling oranges, why can't you sell oranges and blend them into juice? That is your competitive advantage. Why can't you sell oranges and also add mangoes? And if you add mangoes, why can't you also add a little bit of cutting vegetable? And if everyone is cutting vegetable, why don't you introduce the art of delivery? That you introduce, you can just call from the comfort of your house. So you don't need to fight negatively with competition. All aspects of life. When we self-reflect upon ourselves, we are able to avoid negative competition. If it is political competition, there is always bound to have different ideas, different points of view. Why don't we package our political manifesto? Like right now it is 24, 27 it will be a political year. Why don't we package our political campaign well, that we don't need to attack our opponent personally. We only need to package ourselves correctly. And when we understand our competitive advantage, then we are able to live in coexistence, peaceful coexistence. And conflict will always be solved because we will always avoid negative conflict. And we are able to thrive in positive conflict that will beget change. And when you realize that this conflict was leading me to a negative angle, and you have spoken about it, you have dealt with it through the problem solving process that we will talk in a different show. When you have analyzed the problem, you understood the problem, you have gone into the solution of the problem, change happens, and you are able to avoid the same causal problem. If the problem was tribalism in politics, we have analyzed that our politics is tribal based, that it shrouds the politics of ideas, it shrouds the politics of development. Why don't we analyze this problem? Once we analyze it critically, solve it, and then allow change to proceed. Like we did with our constitution, we allowed change to proceed. And this is always continuous negotiation within our society. Yes.
I believe competition goes hand in hand with creativity.
Yes.
And for all these things that you've mentioned to happen, we need to have cooperation. Maybe you can talk about cooperation in understanding a society.
Cooperation is very important. Remember, when you are conflicting and you're living with people, that means even if you hate them, you will still see them. And you are coexisting with them, and you're in competition with them, there needs to be cooperation. We need to cooperate. How do we work together? How do we join hands together? How do we go back to the philosophies of our forefathers, Harambe? How do we come together? How do we cooperate then in this society? How do we cooperate within this institution called marriage? How do we come together, not to be split together, not to be split apart, but to be brought together by this conflict, to allow change happen? We must cooperate. But that's such that we want to say that when you have completely solved the problem, we need to cooperate. Like for instance, if I could just say, cooperation really happened in Kenya the other day. Two political divides were in different camps. Cooperation happened. It has always served this country. There has been the philosophy, and people have always criticized it. When there was the political divide of 1997, Raila Amolo Odinga joined Moi. It was called the government of cooperation. In 2002, there was cooperation between opposition, and they brought the unbogable that brought a very good wave of change. Cooperation happened. Two fractioneers sat down to cooperate and deal with this problem together. And even most recently, when there was the fractioneer between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, they went into the cooperation that was dubbed a handshake. Problem was avoided. Conflict was avoided through that dialogue. There was competition was avoided negative competition and it became competition of ideas. Bring your ideas, I bring my ideas. Let us build a country called Kenya. There was coexistence together, and most recently we saw cooperation, and we have now a broad-based government. This is just but one of the examples. In families, we can bring in cooperation.
Yeah.
If it is the phones that are bringing problem, why can't we sit down, analyze the problem, have an understanding what is causing problem between me and you? Let us have cooperation. Can we cooperate? Can we understand each other? Can we communicate? Can we understand each other and forge a way forward? If it is a church, if there is a problem within church, can you cooperate? Can you coordinate? Can you talk to each other, not talking at each other? Can we be a society that talks with each other? Remember, Chinua Achebe is advising us. When things are falling apart, as they are doing right now, we have a lot of social media problems. We have a lot of problems with our youths. We have a lot of problems within our religions and everything. The Shakaholas have met us. We have suicide happening, and we can talk about suicide in a different show. So many problems. We have the problems of drugs and substance abuse. There is an alcoholic in your family. That is a conflict. How are you solving it, my viewers? How are you going to solve it positive, such that you bring in coexistence? There is peaceful coexistence, and your home becomes a home. A home becomes a place of peace. And these suffering alcoholics can find solace there. They can find belonging there. They can find their own safety and security needs. Can you ensure that your home is a home where your wife is self-actualizing their dreams? This is a place where they re-energize. When they get out of work, they come home to re-energize. It's a place of rest. But we are not saying it will be devoid of conflict. Conflict are bound to be there. But can we take advantage of them to be positive? Can we look at them as avenues of change? And then when we solve them, we cooperate well. We live in good cooperation. We are able to join hands. Kidogo kidogo chaweza kujaza kibaba chetu.
Yes.
Either cha kitaifa, in our religions, or in katika majamii yetu, society. These forces are supposed to be joined together. There is no order in which they come. Sometimes conflict comes, then conflict begets cooperation. Sometimes there is need for cooperation without conflict. But most importantly, sometimes, so the conflict always begets these others. These others are always children of mother conflict. But we must look at conflict positively today. But for us to look at conflict positively, we must be a talking society. We must be a society that is talking to our youth. We must not be condemning them. Remember, we have always said here that labeling creates character. We must not label them as Kalewa. We must not label them as the bad people. We must not label them negatively, because they are part and parcel. They are co-ingredient of this society we call Kenya. They are co-ingredient in that church that you call home. They are co-ingredient in our own homes. We must live with them. Ni lazima tuongee pamoja, because when we stop talking, we start fighting.
Wow.
And any society that goes towards the fighting way loses a lot. Loses a lot.
So in a society there'll be conflict, people need to coexist.
Yes.
There'll be competition.
Yes.
And people need to cooperate.
They need to cooperate, because if you don't cooperate, then you're going to the negativities of conflict. You're going to the abyss. And going to the abyss, history is replete with examples that road is a very dangerous road. We must be warned by that road through the 207 path. We must be warned through the history. And if you look at the annals of history, there is examples beyond measure. So we must always take positively this path of solving them. If it is at family level, there is more than examples of family that have broken apart because they never solved their conflict. They never coordinated. They never coexisted peacefully. There was no cooperation. Cooperation even in financial matters. How do we cooperate? How do we agree? How do we decide things and move forward as a unit? Yes.
Thank you for educating us and for giving us that knowledge on how best we can understand our society.
Yes.
It can be done.
It will always be done. We only need to do our part. Part of that is subscribing,
Yes.
liking,
Yes.
and sharing.
Yes.
Asante sana.
Thank you.